Universitas PGRI Semarang is located in the culturally strong Semarang City, Central Java Province, Indonesia. With these features, Semarang is a potential place for students to develop themselves. The spirit that drives Universitas PGRI Semarang is nationalism and religiosity. Nationalism is the spirit to unite the nation in the midst of culture differences. We have 7 faculties consist of Faculty of Education. This faculty is the oldest faculty at our campus with the largest number of students. It has 3 study programs: the Guidance and Counseling Study Program, Elementary School Teacher Education, and Early Childhood Development Teacher Education. Faculty of Social Science and Sports Education. There are several points that become our focus in this faculty. First, the value of humanism as national identity. Second, physical health as a support for quality education. Third, the understanding of economic values as a pillar of human civilization. This faculty has 3 study programs: Pancasila and Citizenship Civil Education, Physical and Recreational Education, and Economic Education. Faculty of Language and Arts. This faculty provides education to generate language and art educators with pedagogical personnel, social and professional competence and competitive abilities in dealing with the current age development in order to develop themselves into professionals such as translator, newscasters, or journalists by making use of their language and artistic skills. This faculty has 3 study programs: Indonesian Language and Literature Education, English Education, Regional Language and Literature Education, Javanese Language. Faculty of Mathematics, Science, and Information Technology Education. This faculty has study programs of Mathematics Education, Biology Education, Physics Education, and Information Technology Education. The vision of this faculty is to be an excellent and distinguished faculty of Mathematics, Natural Science, and Information Technology Education by 2025. Faculty of Engineering and Informatics, established on April 17, 2014. This faculty has 6 study programs, namely Architecture, Mechanical Engineering, Civil Engineering, Electrical Engineering, Informatics, and Food Technology. Faculty of Economic and Business. This faculty has a mission to be a faculty of economics and business that excels in the field of digital-based, creative economics and business with a distinctive identity. Faculty of Law. The Faculty of Law of University of PGRI Semarang is committed to develop legal knowledge, and this is done, among others, by organizing seminars, discussions, comparative studies, and field experience practices. In order to support the teaching and learning activities, we have 4 complexes of campuses. Campus 1, located at Jalan Dr. Cipto, Jalan Lontar. This campus consists of representative and modern buildings for teaching and learning activities. This campus consists of central building, main building, student activity center, library, graduate program building, as well as a representative auditorium meeting hall for national class concerts and international seminars. Campus 2, located at Jalan Sriwijaya. This campus has a hotel available for both students and public in general, as well as a large meeting room for teacher professional training programs and various other large-scale meetings. Campus 3, located at Jalan Bendan Duo. This campus has a building for students' practices, especially mechanical and electrical engineering department students. This campus supports various activities to increase electrical, mechanical, and architectural skills. Campus 4, located at Jalan Gajah. This campus has a teaching learning building complex and sport centers including basketball, badminton, futsal, and other athletic sports activities. This campus also has a dormitory building provided for students, as well as a high school laboratory school, which was established by the Universitas PGRI Semarang. Why do you have to choose UGRIS as a place to study? We realize the importance of international relations to connect the discourse currently developing in the international world. This is where we establish a collaboration to open up opportunities for career leaders through students and lecture exchanges, credit transfer and double degree program, joint internship and research, and publication with our reputable university partners. We believe that in our fast-paced and competitive world, there are basic competencies every young generation has to possess, namely excellence and distinction. Excellence in either emotional and spiritual intelligence and the ability to retain the personality as a cultured human being. Please join UGRIS.
Pak Pacar, kopinya udah dibuatkan kopi.
Terima kasih. Pas kaum saya kami kita izin besok mau lanjut lagi di sini. Boleh Bapak.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Notice that we are apart from a different region, country, even from different continents. For sure, we have a very different time. The Excellency Rector University of PGRI Semarang, Dr. Sri Suciati M. Hum, the Honorable our Vices of Rector University of PGRI Semarang, the Honorable the Director of Cooperation and International Affairs, University of PGRI Semarang, Dr. Nur Hidayat M. Hum, who guide us to host this very precious event, and also Honorable our Head of International Affairs, Miss Mega Novita, PhD, the Honorable our invited speaker, Dr. Banu Prakash Nuna, from RV University, India, also Mrs. Marzelina Herdianti, SHMH, from Law Faculty, University of PGRI Semarang. The respectable to all the lecturer of Law Faculty, University of PGRI Semarang, and also from International Affairs Office, University of PGRI Semarang, as the committee of this very precious agenda. The respectable to all the audiences, ladies and gentlemen, are happy. Dear audiences, all praises to God that we can gather here, even virtually, with a precious agenda that hosted by Law Faculty in a collaboration with International Affairs, University of PGRI Semarang, with the big theme, Restructuring Law and Human Rights, International Law and Policy Perspective from Indonesia and India. Well, This lecture series will be divided into 3 series. The first is today, and our upcoming lecture series will be held on August and also September. Well, currently we have our first lecture series. So dear audiences, welcome in our first lecture series with a specific theme, efforts towards protection of women and children against sexual offenses, perspective from Indonesia and India. Dear audiences, talking about women and children protection is a very crucial issue that currently still being a hot discussion for many countries, especially for Indonesia as well as India. Based on UNICEF data, 1 in 3 women and girls experience violence in their lifetime, while more than a third of boys experience physical violence. The protection of women and children is one of the cardinal tasks of a nation. But again, against sexual abuses, to protect women and children is not an easy way. But today, we have an outstanding speaker from RV University, India, and also from University of PGRI Semarang. From RV University, India, we have Dr. Banu Prakashnuna, and from University of PGRI Semarang, we have Mrs. Marcelina Hardianti SHMH. They will guide us to find the other challenges, opportunities, and even the solution from this upcoming issue. So therefore, today, the discussion will divide into 2 sessions. And the first session, we have Dr. Banu. He is the Director Center for the Victimological and Victim Assistance from RV University, India. So welcome, Dr. Banu. Dr. Banu Prakashna. I don't know my spelling, is it right or not, but I hope is it right. Dr. Banu. I think he has been entered to the room. Let me greet him.
Yep.
Hi, Dr. Banu.
Hello, Dr. Nadia.
Hello.
Am I audible?
Nice to meet you, Dr. Banu. We are very honored to have you here.
My pleasure.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, for the overview of the curriculum vitae, we know that Dr. Banu is a very outstanding and awesome speaker, and he will guide us to get an insight, a new insight for this upcoming issue. So, without further ado, Dr. Banu, time is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Nadia. It's an honor and a great pleasure to be a part of this lecture series today. And before I begin with my presentation, I have a few people to thank who made this lecture series very much possible. I'll try and go a little slow, but please remind me if I'm going too fast. I understand some of the audiences are from non-English speaking. We are also non-English speaking individuals, but yeah, I'll remind myself to go a little slower when I speak. So, like I said, my special thanks to begin with to the rector and the vice rector of Universitas of Greece, Semarang, for their constant support to their faculty members, to their administrative staff, to have a free hand in terms of making possible collaborations across the world and making these events possible, a reality. And my special thanks to Professor Noor, whom I've had met in Bali, and since then we have stayed in connection. And Professor Noor had introduced me to Dr. Nadia, and we have had earlier discussions in terms of having joint research. And in one of our conversations, the idea of lecture series have emerged. And I'm so thankful and grateful to both of them and to the Department of Faculty of Law of Greece for thinking about this lecture series, first of all, and thinking that RV University could be a potential partner to deliver this kind of lecture series. We're all grateful for this. And I must apologize for not having many participants from my university because we are on break. And we promise that in the next lecture in the series, we'll have more number of participants attending from my university, students and faculty both. So with that, How is it said? Is it Selamat Siang? Selamat Siang? Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad to address the gathering here today, and my heartfelt compliments to the Faculty of Law, University as Grace Samarang, for this wonderful initiative to organize a lecture series between the law faculties of RV University and UPGRIS. My special regards to Professor Noor, Dr. Nadia for the timely coordination for putting together this program. My compliments to my fellow speaker for today, Dr. Marzelina Hardianti. I have a special connection to Indonesia. Needless to mention, I've been there 4 times. I've interacted with most of the brilliant minds in the field of victimology, law, and criminology, particularly within Indonesia. It feels like my second home. Whenever I come to Indonesia, I feel very welcomed, and I feel very happy coming to Indonesia whenever I get a chance. So I feel connected. I wanted to say that. So today's topic is very close to my heart. I head the Center for Victimological Research and Victim Assistance at my university. I've set the center, and so we want to do good work when it comes to supporting victims, crime, and human rights violation, abuse. So we have started. So far, we've had a very small journey of 1 year. So we will finish 1 year this November. Within the short span of time, we managed to do quite a lot of collaborations, and we've struck some good research collaborations too with partnering universities. And we also have a lecture series within my university, part of this Center for Victimology. And so one of the speakers have been from Indonesia too. Today's topic, like I said, is particularly very, very close to my heart. And my PhD work is also on violence against women and children and the victim support related to the violence against women and children. So please allow me to share my screen. Are my slides visible?
Yep.
Okay. So the topic for this first lecture in this lecture series is efforts towards protection of women and children against sexual offenses. I would like to, so the perspectives that will be brought for today's lecture is both from Indonesia and India. So I will be bringing you to the context of Indian scenario. How is violence against women perceived, officially perceived, in terms of the quantity of the problem, the magnitude of the problem, and in terms of the schematic interventions that government has in order to support these victims who have been victims of violence of various forms. Particularly today, we'll be talking about sexual offenses, referring to both women and children. We try and bring in Indian as well as Indonesian perspectives, both from the legalities as well as the victim support perspective. So the overview would be to provide you with some brief context of what is this violence against women and children, both in the global context as well as in the Indian context. I'll give you some figures, trying to lay a groundwork to emphasize on the severity of this issue, to emphasize on how serious this problem is. And further, I will be talking about how do we combat violence against women and children, both from the point of view of there could be several ways in which you could combat. But in today's presentation, I would be particularly focusing on the legislative framework that India adopts, the kind of laws and regulations that we have in terms of protecting and preventing violence against women and children. And then I'll be talking about some schematic interventions. We have one umbrella victim support program, which is called One Stop Sakhi Centers. So I'll be introducing what these Sakhi Centers are, what they do very briefly, and then some positive affirmative actions that the government has taken in terms of protecting women against women and children against violence. So the gender-based violence in the global context, when we talk about, it is certainly anywhere, any part of the world, it is important to see gender-based violence as a public health concern. So it is a public health issue, and there is a lot of literature which refers to this as a very grave public health concern. It doesn't just affect the individual families at a larger scale, it affects the entire community. So it is also a grave human right violation. Any form of victimization you look at, in the end, it is definitely a human right violation. So one emerging concept out of COVID scenario in the context of gender-based violence is shadow pandemic. So while the world was struggling with overcoming the COVID situation, there was another silent shadow pandemic which was going on, which is referring to the gender-based violence. So many countries have reported increasing trends in violence against women and children, especially in the closed, isolated uh, uh, house settings. So Dr. Nadia also in her opening remarks mentioned that according to the UN Women and World Health Organization's figures, one in three females experience at least one episode of physical or sexual violence before reaching age 18. So we are talking about people who are considered to be minors. So by the time these a girl who is born and becoming an adult, crossing an age beyond 18, he the girl would have already had an experience of physical or sexual violence. It is such severe in its form. The recent and newly emerging concept is also technology facilitated gender-based violence. So most of the traditional crimes very soon are going to move to the online world. So we will see the trends of crime reporting. We will see less and less number of traditional crimes happening and more of cyber crimes happening. And gender-based violence will also take an online space very, very soon. It has already started. You will see more number of the crime instances happening in the online space very soon. You'll have intimate partner violence, harassment, stalking, child luring, hate or misinformation campaigns online. So all of this constitutes technology facilitated gender-based violence. And when we talk about sustainable developmental goals, so the fifth goal in that list is to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls in public and private spaces. So this is not just for one country, a guideline that is given. This is for the countries across the globe. They have sustainable developmental goals to meet. And one of the important goals is goal number 5, which directly addresses prevention and protection of women against women and children against violent activities. So women, when we come back to the Indian context, women are half the population, at least half the population of the entire population of the country. So we are talking about at least 1.4 billion people currently living in this country. About 700 million women and girl children live in this moment in this country. Okay. Despite progressive legislations, we have good legal frameworks. We have solid rules and regulations to guide our society. But access to justice is still difficult and cumbersome. It can result in re-victimization of women. When we talk about in victimology, there is a concept of re-victimization where a person who has been victimized before will be victimized again. It could happen by the direct victimization, or it could be indirect in the form of secondary victimization through attitude and the negative remarks of the individuals who are in positions of helping these victims do victimize these victims again and again. So the chances of re-victimization do happen to these individuals who were once victims. And there are many forms of violence when we're talking about against women and children. It could be harassment, it could be domestic violence, it could be rape, dowry death, acid attack. Maybe dowry death is not a concept which is very familiar to the Indonesian context. But dowry death, although the numbers have decreased drastically in the country, but you do hear once in a while about dowry death scenario, a dowry death incident happening in some part of the country, even now. Acid attack, which is a very gruesome kind of, very painful kind of violence against women, girls, female feticide, killing even before a girl child is born in the fetus, abortions, forced abortions against a girl child in the womb is called female feticide and infanticide. Killing a girl child or killing a girl fetus. So these are some of the common kinds of violence that we witness when it comes to violence against women and children. To mention about some numbers from 2022. These are crime reported numbers. About 371,000 crimes against women have been committed in year 2022 alone. In just 1 year, we have these many number of crimes against women. And it's very important to make a note here. These are only reported number of crimes. These are the instances that have come to the police station's records. So there will be several, at least 10 times these numbers that have gone unreported. So when we talk about dark figure in victimology or criminology, it's always at least 9 to 10 times the numbers that goes unreported. So about 55% increase from 2015. In 7 years, the number of crimes committed against women and children have simply increased by 50%. And every 15 minutes, a woman or a girl is raped in our country. In India, every 15 minutes, you will hear an instance of a girl or a woman being raped. When it comes to crimes against children, there are about 128,000 crimes committed against children. Most of them constitute to kidnapping and abduction. Child rape, I'll talk about what POCSO is in a while. Child rape and POCSO cases constitute, again, for about 40%. So you see that there are a lot of violent crimes being committed against women and children in this country, and the numbers are quite startling. These are some of the newspaper cuttings I've gathered for this presentation today. So the gang rape victim left unattended by Bangalore hospital for 3 hours. When we talk about victim support, crime is something, it has its own challenges in terms of prevention. But what we as responsible social individuals could do is to support these victims in an adequate manner, in a manner that is possibly reducing the pain and hurt, not aggravating it, not increasing it. But you have to look at the societal responses at times, you feel very disheartened. For example, in this newspaper reporting where a gang rape victim was left unattended by a Bangalore hospital for 3 hours. She was not attended by the hospital staff for 3 hours, even after she was admitted in the hospital. Right? There was some instances where a stranger commented on the attire of a girl in a shopping mall. And India's rape crisis, 106 rapes per day, out of which 4 in 10 victims are minors. So out of 10 rapes being committed in this country, you will see these rapes are being committed. Out of 10, there are 4 children, girl victims. So the legislative framework, like I said in the beginning, we have a very strong, very solid legislative framework. There are solid rules and regulations to guide the individuals. And despite that, we have so many number of crimes happening. These are some of the legislative frameworks that we have. The Indecent Representation of Women Act of 1986, the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013, Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act of 2005, Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961, Prohibition of Child Marriage Act of 2006, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, it's called POCSO 2012. So due to paucity of time, I would not be able to cover all of this, but I thought it would be relevant to put emphasis on at least one legislative act. So I want to talk more about the POCSO Act, the last one here, the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. So this is a very strong legislative framework that was made into an act in 2012 by the Parliament of India. And so under this, the sexual offenses against children are listed as penetrative sexual assault, which is rape, aggravated penetrative sexual assault, sexual assaults, aggravated sexual assaults, sexual harassment, child pornography, abetment to commit any of the above listed crimes, or attempt to commit any of the above listed crimes. These are some of the serious offenses that are covered by the POCSO Act. POCSO is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. So till 2012, before the enactment of POCSO, there was no specific legislation governing child sexual abuse in this country. This is the first time there is a law, there is a legal framework which could separately put an emphasis on child sexual offenses. Increasing incidence of sexual offenses against children is also the important motivator for this law to become an act. IPC recognized limited forms of sexual violence against children, and sexual offenses other than rape fell into the category of outraging the modesty of women. With a minimal punishment, the offender could escape. But with the POXO Act, the law has strengthened in its ways in terms of protecting and preventing offenses against children. And the offenders are now seriously punished. They are not simply escaped by a minor punishments. So to protect children from the offenses, that is why the POXO has been brought into law: sexual assault, sexual harassment, pornography, and to safeguard interest of child-friendly mechanism for reporting. What POXO guarantees is, what POXO aims for is to provide a child-friendly mechanism for reporting. You cannot treat an adult victim and a child victim with the same kind of approach. You'll have to have more understanding, more accommodating and sensitive approach when you're dealing with children. And POXO puts a lot of emphasis on that. There should be special procedures for investigation. The way a police officer should conduct an investigation with a woman who has been raped versus a child who has been sexually assaulted or raped is completely different. You cannot have same strategy, same language, same kind of attitude, right? It has to be completely different the way both a woman and a girl is treated. So POXO puts an emphasis on that, and medical examination, recording of evidence, special care and attention has to be taken in all these areas. Speedy trials through designated courts. So now in India, a child sexual abuse case or a child rape case, there are special courts to handle, because our courts, our criminal justice system is already overburdened with enormous number of cases they deal with. So if these cases get into that mainstream court system, it's very likely that they will take years to years and decades for the case to be heard in the court. So there are special designated courts now being held to address these matters which are of prime concern. So if there is a child rape case, that case will be directly sent to a specialized court, not a mainstream court. So now there are specialized courts, like for example, rape as well, and acid attack. There are special fast track courts which would hear these matters in a swift and speedy manner and provide justice in a speedy manner. So the POXO has brought in definitely strict punishments when it comes to the crimes. At least 20 years of life imprisonment with a fine is awarded for penetrative sexual assault, and aggravated penetrative sexual assault could at least go up to, sometimes even a death penalty could also be awarded for an aggravated penetrative sexual assault. And in POXO, a recording statement of the child by police or by the court, enough measures are taken in order to ensure that a child is not seeing the accused, does not come in the vicinity of the accused. Police officer not to be in uniform. These are rules that the guidelines that the police officers and people who come in contact with a child victim must follow. A police officer must not wear a uniform. A uniform is definitely intimidating, a threatening thing. And these children might feel intimidated in the presence of an officer with a uniform. So it is recommended that these police officers do not wear uniforms when they're investigating and interacting with the children. Appointment of guardian is guaranteed with the POXO Act. Support person, the child can have all time a support person along with them. Facilitators and translators are provided as and when required. In-camera proceedings is also an option that is given as per POXO Act. They need not come to the court at all. They can stay at the home settings and they can give this video recordings for the magistrate to look at. So these are some of the provisions that are guaranteed in POXO. And there are also procedures which are streamlined in a way to ensure that these are child-friendly and victim-friendly when it comes to child cases. The questions, when we're talking about procedures in the court, the questions asked by the public prosecutor or the defense counsel, they cannot ask the child victim directly, like how we see in cases where a woman is on trial, where the questions are directly directed at the women victim. Here it is not possible. A child cannot be directly questioned by the defense lawyer or the public prosecutor. All the questions that they intend to ask the child must be passed on to the judge. Only the judge has an authority to look at the questions to ensure that these are sensitive enough. This will not hurt the child further, and only the judge will ask these questions to the child victim. None of the public prosecutors or the defense lawyers have an authority to do that. and frequent breaks, if needed, will be given during the court procedures. Child-friendly atmosphere, right, is must be created, and child should not be called very frequently to the court, and no aggressive questioning or character assassination is allowed in the court. Non-disclosure of identity, confidentiality becomes very paramount when you're talking about child victims. Compensation to victim is also part of POCSO Act. Dr. Nadia, how much time do you have?
It's very okay. Still 15 minutes is
All right.
okay. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thank you. So this is a very strong law, certainly, and there are several advantages of having a POCSO Act. One, this guarantees very stricter punishment to the offenders, and this could also, in a way, make people think twice before they committing crime. But the downside of this law is that again there is increased reporting, but there is poor conviction, and there is increased pendency despite POCSO being addressed in special courts, right? So it has led to more number of cases being filed and less conviction rates and overuse of the law, right? Any law that is designed in the name of protection, there is a possibility of it being misused too. For example, the sexual harassment law that we have in our country, it is also misused by some of the women as a way of taking revenge against people they do not like, or to abuse the power, or to climb up the ladder. There could be several reasons why they misuse the law. Similarly, POCSO, I'm not saying children will misuse it, but the parents of children, there have been instances where a boy was sent to prison for getting into a relationship with a minor girl. Even if the relationship was very consensual, both the girl and the boy have agreed to get into a relationship. It was a consensual relation, but the parents of the girl did not like that, and they have filed a POCSO complaint against the boy, and the boy was sent to the jail. So this is simply a misinterpretation of the law, or the law is not tight enough to address these kind of loopholes. The challenging situations here, like I said, consensual sexual acts of children. So anybody who engages in a sexual activity with a girl child below 16 years of age will be trialed as a POCSO case. Okay, and a POCSO has very, very stricter punishments. So if a girl who is in a consensual sexual relationship with a boy could be a minor or a major. A boy, minor or a major, if he enters into a sexual relationship with a girl who is a minor below 16 years, then this boy could very well be sentenced up to 10 to 20 years of prison term, even if they gotten into a sexual relationship consensually. Okay, so this is one of the loopholes that we have. And several cases like elopement, a boy and girl running away from the home, right, with an intention to get married because the parents do not agree to their relationship. So these kind of elopement cases are also common, and they very well qualify for POCSO. As per the law, they should be tried. Teenage pregnancies, right? So when there is a teenage who got pregnant, then that is very well a POCSO case. Now, how as a society, how do we address these kind of challenging situations when we are interpreting POCSO law is something that we are still deliberating on. Marital rape within POCSO. So POCSO has given a little bit of relaxation, because in our country, there is a possibility of child marriages going on even now. So girls could be married at a very young age, like 14 or 15. I wouldn't say these are more and more cases now, but you still have these kind of cases which are socially accepted. Now, those are as per the law, will very well qualify for a POCSO case. But the government has given a relaxation of up to 15 years for a girl. So if the boy marries a girl who is beyond 15 years, then it is okay to enter into a sexual relationship in the context of marriage. So marital rape does not apply to POCSO cases where there is a marriage and the relationship is covered by the marriage. So now the need for victim support in India. So we've looked at the number of victims that this country is producing every year, right? So there is so much of need for victim support. For sexual violence alone, now we'll have about 5.4 million people who would require psychosocial and medical legal assistance every year. 2.7 million girls need child protection services. And about 60% of all of them will utilize emergency response services if the services are accessible and of good quality. So this is government published report. So if you provide them with good support system, there are chances that at least 60% of these total number of victims are going to use these services. So I said, so we'll now talk about the victim support efforts that our country is invested in. So one of the premier umbrella program for victim support that we have is One Stop Center. So this is called Sakhi in our country, Sakhi meaning friend. So a friend-like support system, which is being provided to the victims of violence, both women and girl children. So the Sakhi one-stop centers were set up following the Nirbhaya gang rape incident. Some of you may be familiar with a gang rape incident that had happened in this country in 2012, about a decade ago, where a pharmacy student, pharmacy female student was gang raped by 5 men, including one juvenile. So following that gang rape, there were several law amendments which were happened in this country, and setting up of one-stop centers was one of the recommendations by the law commissions. And we now currently have over 700 one-stop centers that are operational in 27 states and union territories of this country. And about 500,000 women and girl children have already accessed support from these centers. And these centers provide different kinds of services: emergency rescue services, women helpline 181, universal women helpline, psychological counseling support, medical assistance, legal assistance, police assistance, shelter facility, video conferencing. So all of these are different kinds of services that are provided by the one-stop centers. I want to bring some contrast between different kinds of one-stop centers we have. Some of them are in a very poor state. So these are also called Sakhi one-stop centers. And these are the centers that I visited during my PhD thesis. And this is also a one-stop center. So depending upon which state is handling this program and depending upon the availability of resources within that state, either they have a well-maintained, a decent building for a one-stop center, or they have a very poor infrastructure which is not up to the mark, right? And there is also misutilization of resources. You see, these are air coolers, air conditioners, which are left unused. So there is also misutilization of funds. Yep. So I'm in the picture. So this is part of my field work for my PhD. Yeah. So we talked about Sakhi one-stop centers, which provide different kinds of victim support services. And we also have something called as Women Helpline, an integrated universal national women helpline. From any mobile phone or any phone, you dial 181, it reaches a centralized helpline where people on the other end will ask you what's your problem and they try to assist you. And this women helpline, the idea is to link these women helplines with the one-stop centers. So whenever a girl or someone makes a call to this 181 women helpline, it directly connects them to the one-stop centers, and victim support services could be provided by these people at the one-stop centers. That is the idea behind the National Women Helpline. But I must say this is a very failed attempt. This could not be integrated with the one-stop centers at a larger scale. And the reality check as of now is that in my state, we do not have 181 functioning as of now. And several of the states did not use 181 as their primary helpline number. They have devised their own helpline numbers within the state, making this very redundant in its resource. Nirbhaya Fund, so following the event of the gang rape, government has set up about 6 billion rupees set aside for the projects related to safety and empowerment of women. So any district or a state in this country could come up with a project with safety and security of women, and the government could fund that project. So we have about 6 billion Indian rupees set aside for the utilization for women and child protection schemes. So it has been already 1 decade, 10 years have passed since the inception of this fund, and still we have about 30% of these Nirbhaya funds which are unutilized. And unutilization is because of mismanagement of funds. Government has noticed that these funds are being misused. The people are not spending them appropriately, and so they stalled the release of funds. So we still have about 30% of the funds left unused from this Nirbhaya fund. And there are several other practical measures that the government has taken. Like, for example, in the phones, you have these emergency panic buttons, SOS panic buttons. So anybody can, in this situation of emergencies, can press this button and police assistance could be provided to them. We also have women police stations in our country, dedicated women police stations to take up cases related to violence against women and children. Pink public transport. We have dedicated public transport system, which we call them as pink autos or pink buses or pink metro rails, right? These are dedicated only for women to travel. So these are some of the measures that the government is taking in order to ensure that the public spaces are safer for women. Anti-trolling responses. Cyber cell has become stronger and stronger in its efforts to prevent crimes against women on online space. And these are some of the examples of the public transport that I mentioned. We have pink autos colored in pink, buses colored in pink, referring that these are dedicated only for women and girl children. And even the trains, you have separate coaches reserved for women and girls to enter. No men or boys are allowed into these separate coaches of the train. So these are some of the measures that the government is taking to ensure that the public transport is safer for women. And women police stations is also another important positive measure that the government has brought in. We have about 750 women police stations in the country. And but the problem with this is we do not have so much of women police force to match up to. So when you look at the number of police people who are working in this country, it's only about 11% of women who are working in these police stations. About 90% of people working in the police station are men. So because of shortage of women police, we could not adequately equip these police stations with women police staff. So although it has resulted in 23% increase in reporting of crimes against women and children, judiciary, again, it has failed because of the overburdening of these cases. Judiciary could not match up to bring concrete end to these kind of cases. So this is one of my favorite quotes. So the real test of the criminal justice system is not how well we punish our offenders. So when we talked about the legislative framework so far, we looked at how severe the punishments could be, what could be done in terms of putting the offenders behind the bars, but that is not the real test of criminal justice system. The real test of criminal justice system is how well we treat our victims. What kind of support? How do we address these people in pain and hurt? What do we do to them? How do we talk to them? So the real test of criminal justice system is not to punish the offenders, but treat the victims nicely. So thank you, Terima kasih. And yeah, these are my contact details. I hope my presentation is somewhat informative to some of you. And thank you so much again for giving me this opportunity. And I look forward to listening to Ms. Hardianti's presentation. Thank you so much. Thanks, Dr. Nadia. Thanks, Professor Noor.
Okay, terima kasih, Dr. Banu. Thank you so much, Dr. Banu. Such a very tremendous and comprehensive explanation for us. Okay, well, is it okay if we continue to the next speaker, Dr. Banu? Sure. And after that, we will have a Q&A session. Is it okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, please welcome Mrs. Marzelina Hardianti, SHMH, from Law Faculty, University of PGRI Semarang. She is one of lecturer in Law Faculty, University of PGRI Semarang, and also she is being a Committee of Sexual Assault Task Force of UPGRIS, and her research and also her interest is about women and children protection. Okay, Ms. Marzelina Hardianti, time is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Nadia Latifah, SHLM. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. The Honorable, our Director of International Office, University of PGRI Semarang, Mr. Dr. Nur Hidayat M. Hum, and the Honorable, our Lead of International Division, Faculty of Law, University of PGRI Semarang, Ms. Nadia Latifah, and the Honorable, our invited speaker from RV University, Mr. Dr. Banu Prakash Nuna. Nice to meet you, Mr. Banu, and the respectables our audience in this seminar. First, I would like to present my research with the title The Urgency of Safe House for Handling Women and Children Victims in Indonesia. Okay, please for share screen.
Wes lagi. Buang sampah. Tante Aca mau pulang. Ayo.
Ya, buang sampah.
Buang sampah nih, Dek. Main Tante Aca kamu.
Ribetnya.
Ini.
Ada ayamnya.
Cepet.
Lemnya mana? Pinjam.
Cepet. Datang.
Ulang tahun.
Okay. The urgency of safe house for handling women and children victims of violence in Indonesia. Women and children are subjects that are often marginalized in society. The problems underlying the marginalization of women and children are domestic violence, sexual violence or sexual harassment, physical violence, psychological violence, and online gender-based violence, and even human trafficking. Violence experienced by children varies. There is physical and psychological violence, both physical and psychological violence. This violence has a very bad impact on children's development, especially their psychological development. Cases of physical violence are a serious matter to be disclosed and must receive the attention of all parties. However, in reality, there are still many cases of physical violence and cases of domestic violence that still cannot be exposed to the surface, especially those that occur to children. This is caused by various factors, including fear of the perpetrators, embarrassment if the family's disgrace is known by the public, or permissive culture that forgives perpetrators. In line, the government issues law number 23 of 2004 concerning eliminating domestic violence. However, this has not been effective in reducing the number of violence that occurs in households. Based on annual report 2022 of the National Commission on Women, that sexual violence as a dominant form of violence against women. There are 2,228 cases, or 38.21%, was followed by psychological violence, 2,083 cases, or 35.72%. Meanwhile, data from service providers was dominated by physical violence. 6,001 cases, followed by sexual violence, are 4,102 cases. If we look in more detail at the data on complaints to Women Commission in the public domain, sexual violence is always the highest. There are 2000, there are 1,127 cases, while in the personal sphere, the most violence is psychological. Handling cases of violence against women and children is carried out through the presence of the Integrated Service Center for the Empowerment of Women and Children. The Integrated Service Center for the Empowerment of Women and Children is an institution formed by the government based on the regulation of the Minister of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection of the Republic of Indonesia, number 5 of 2010, concerning guidelines for the formation and development of Integrated Service Center. The term is a type of service institution for victims of gender-based violence and children, which is generic term is the Integrated Service Center. Other institutions that are often referred to as safe house, children's social protection house, trauma center safe house, women's social protection, and hallway house. These institutions are from a referral service for victims of women and children. Scope of referral service based on service standard guidelines and referral mechanism for women victims of violence are medical service, and then medical service, and then legal aid service, resocialization service, shelter, safe house, and counseling service. The handling of women as the victim of violence is to rehabilitate their condition after the violence that they have experienced. The varieties of needs for the victim to rehabilitate the victim makes the service diversified into different needs. Every victim needs different service. However, there are some services which are useful in supporting the need of victim rehabilitation, including medical service. To the damage of violence can be done in the form of medical and psychological service to recover the physical and psychological condition enhanced with legal needs, such as visum at reported and DNA test. To women with disability after becoming the victim of violence or the victim of sexual violence, there should be a psychological test to decide the calendar age and mental age of the woman. Besides, the test will also be able to determine the level of disability got by the victim. This test is usually given to detect the mental and intellectual disability of people. The service of legal aids providing information related to the legal process of assistance in the court process. The service of law enforcement is if the victim reports their cases to be processed under the criminal justice system. This task is the authority of law enforcement institution, among other policemen, attorney general office, and Supreme Court. For women with disabilities, they also need an expert witness and the translator of sign language. The service should be provided by the country quickly. The country can provide it in tied to an institution with expertise in this field. And then Resocialization provides service on how the victim can enjoy their life again in society and be accepted by society. And then the shelter give the service by providing place for the victim to stay temporarily, to remove themselves from the reach of the offender, and giving enough space to make the decision related to the violence they have experienced. And safe house, safety place service is the service to protect victims, including making the perpetrators unable to track their whereabouts. And then counseling service. Counseling is aimed to regain the conscientiousness of the victim, making them able to calculate the risk and identify their rights on deciding a part of their education, including releasing victim from the dependence to other people. The safe house services. A safe house is a temporary place for victims of violence from violence perpetrator. Safe house is a name often used in the world of law enforcement and security operation, namely a location or safe place, a place which is right in the of hiding someone who does not want to be known by certain parties in a dangerous situation. Safe house or safe house relate to protection for someone who is in condition and circumstance that dangerous. Safe house service can be accessed at the integrated service center for the empowerment of women and children. Okay. My research problems are: what is the urgency of a safe house for handling victims of violence against women and children in Indonesia? And the second, what are the supporting and inhibiting factors the safe house service for handling violence against women and children? Okay. The methods this research use normative juridical approach or legal approach. This research used secondary data, which is from primary, secondary, and tertiary materials. The primary data from some books, and then regulations, and the primary data from the regulations in Indonesia about handling and protection women and children, and then secondary data from some books and research journal, and then analysis of data using descriptive analysis and result of research. The urgency of a safe house for handling victims of violence against women and children in Indonesia. The first, improving amount of women and children violence victims in Indonesia. And the second, regulation of handling women and children violence victims by a referral service as a specially safe house services. Improving amount of women and children every year based on annual report of the Women Commission in Indonesia. The amount women and children victims of violence quite volatile. This is because cases of violence against women and children in Indonesia are experiencing an iceberg phenomenon. This means that the data collected is not sufficient to represent the total number of reports of violence against women and children because there are still many victims who do not dare to report it. Improving amount of women victims every year since 2006 and until 2022. Indonesia have regulations for protection and handling women and children victims of violence. As like, this is report of Indonesian Child Protection Commission since 2019 until 2022. In 2019, there are 11,000 and 57 violence cases for children, and 2022 there are 16,106 violence cases for children. Okay, the regulations are the first, Article 28, sorry. The first, Article 28, a paragraph 2 Indonesian Constitution, that everyone has the right to be free from discriminatory treatment on any basis and is entitled to protection against such discriminatory treatment. And then law number 7 of 1984 concerning ratification of CEDAW. And the fourth, law number 23 of 2004 concerning the elimination of domestic violence, and law number 35 of 2014 concerning amendment to law number 23 of 2002 concerning child protection. And then law number 12 of 2022 concerning the elimination of sexual violence crimes. Then presidential regulation number 18 of 2014, the protection and empowerment of women and children from social conflict. And the last, Minister of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, regulation number 11 of 2022 concerning standard operational procedure for provision of final referral services for women victims of violence. The supporting and inhibiting factors safe house for handling violence against women and children. The supporting factors are to provide temporary shelter that is safe from threats by perpetrators for women and children victims. And the second, to handling women and children victims of violence, and to protect victims of violence from threats by perpetrators. And the inhibiting factor, the first, lack of awareness of victim to report, and then facilities in the safe house are not sufficient, A budget has not yet accommodated the need for a safe house, and not all provinces, districts, and cities in Indonesia have safe house services. Okay, based on the result and discussion, this result concludes that the urgency of a safe house for handling victims of violence against women and children in Indonesia are the first, improving amount of women and children victims of violence every year in Indonesia, and regulation of protection and handling women and children victims. And the second, the supporting factor of a safe house to protect and hand violence victim is giving temporarily place for women and children victim of violence from a threat perpetrators. The inhibiting factors are lack of awareness of victim report, a budget has not yet accommodated, and not all provinces, districts, and cities in Indonesia have safe house service. Okay, that's all my presentation from my paper or research. I give back to moderator Miss Nadia.
Okay, thank you so much for Mrs. Marzelina Hardianti. Such a very tremendous explanation also. Well, we will have Q&A session for the participant. Before, I will remind you for the audiences to fill the link of present to get our international certificate in the end of this session. And we will have Q&A session for the participant. Please raise your hand and introduce your name and affiliation, then your question. Okay. Rifatul Maula. Okay, Rifatul Maula. Please introduce your name and affiliation, then your question. Convey your question. Okay, Rifatul Maula.
My name is Rifatul Maula. I'm from Universitas Negeri Semarang. Question for Dr. Banu as the Director of Victim Vehicle and Victim Assistant of RV Unif India. I want to ask how we can ask the victim of sexual offense to speak up because they say to speak. Thank you.
Okay, such a very nice question from Rifatul Maula from Universitas Negeri Semarang. It's outside from Ugris, right? Okay, the next session, the next question, Aura Diva Saputra.
Hello, is my voice audible? Miss, can you hear my voice?
Yeah, we will hear you.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Banu and Mrs. Marzelina, for your amazing explanation. My name is Aura. I'm from Law Faculty, University of PGRI Semarang. And my question is for Dr. Banu. Sometimes a sexual harassment victim didn't want to report it. Many reasons behind it. Maybe they're scared, maybe there's a shame. I wonder, how's it in India to supporting a victim to report their case? Is it written in India law about what we should do if we know there's a sexual harassment happening? Thank you.
Okay, maybe we will give to Dr. Banu first. I think the first and the second question almost same. They ask about how the victims of the sexual offenses we will treat because they shy to speak. They shy to tell what what happened to them. And because you are the director of the sex of victimological assistant from RV University, and about the Indian law, how they regulated regarding the victim of sexual offenses.
Yeah.
Please, Dr. Banu. Yeah.
Thank you for both the questions. They're very relevant for today's conversation. So firstly, I would say there is no mandatory reporting system unless if it is a child who is a victim of sexual attack, sexual violence. So if you're talking about child victims, these children who are minors below 18 years, if they happen to be the victims of sexual attack, sexual violence, rape, or any other forms of sexual harassment, then the person attending to that child victim has mandatorily report this matter to the police. So there is an obligation on the attending officer. Families function differently. I'm sorry. Families function differently. There could be some form of resistance within the family members to approach the police stations and lodge a formal complaint or approach the authorities. But if a person in authority, a person who is officially designated to attend to these victims, or like, for example, a counselor, a psychologist, a counselor who is speaking to this minor child victim of sexual attack. Now, if the child reports to me or shares the information that he or she has been abused sexually, then I have mandatory obligation on me to report the matter to the authorities, to the police or to the legal officials. I'll have to report the matter. So this is there. However, for major, if an individual is an adult, then he or she has a right to not make a complaint. Okay, so he or she has the entire freedom to take his or her own decisions. They are not obligated by the law to report the incident. And another important, positive affirmative action in terms of victim support is, earlier we did not have the victim support center I mentioned during the presentation. We call them as one-stop centers. Ms. Marzelina also emphasized on this kind of integrated support service model, which we have in our country. So the mandatory police reporting is not a requirement to access the victim support in the country now. So without making a police complaint, victims can still get the support. Earlier, it wasn't the case. To access any kind of formal support, you first have to get a police complaint registered. Okay, because many women or girls will be hesitant to lodge a formal complaint for various reasons, various social, personal, financial reasons. They do not want to lodge the complaint. But if it is a minor girl, if I get the information, I have a duty to report. For major, it is not the case. For adults, they have the freedom to make their choices. Victim support and mandatory reporting to the police are two separate entities when it comes to adult women, but for children, there is mandatory reporting as per the law in place. I hope I answered questions.
Okay. Okay, such a very comprehensive answer. Well, the next question I'll give to Indah Putriadi Ziliwu. Please open your camera and then introduce your name and affiliation, then convey your question.
Okay.
Please, Ms. Indah.
Firstly, thank you, Ms. Nadia, for the time given. Good afternoon to all of us. Introducing myself, my name is Indah Putriadi, Faculty of Law, University PGRI Semarang. Permission to ask Master Banu, would you like to explain how is the phenomena of sexual offenses in India through social media, and how is Indian law regulated that issue? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Banu again. Please tell us about the sexual harassment or sexual offenses in India through social media and how Indian law regulated.
Yeah. So in the beginning of my presentation, also I mentioned that most of the conventional, traditional crimes are soon going to be shifted to online virtual space. What I meant by saying that, like for example, if you have about 300, 400,000 of rape committed in this country in the last 5 years, in the next 5 years, you would see that they will not be the number of physical rape cases versus virtual sexual harassment, virtual cyber stalking happening, right? The number of cases in the online space, virtual space, will go beyond the physical numbers. Okay, and we are in that increasing trend of having online crimes, and online crimes have no bounds. Online sexual harassment could happen, online stalking could happen, online financial fraud could happen, right? Online cyberbullying could happen, or even in the gaming, for example, right? I'll give you an example where, for example, if anyone is into gaming, professional gaming, they have these avatars, avatars created, and they play the game using their avatar. For me, Banu Prakash is an avatar in the online game. So there could be chances of an avatar being sexually harassed in the virtual space. So there could be rape committed against my avatar or my other players' avatar. So these kind of experiences will also mimic similar kind of traumatic experiences that individuals go through when they become a victim of rape physically. Okay, although the physical discomfort is minimized, but the mental traumatic experiences that you would go through because of being part of such experience in the virtual space is no lesser than the physical space traumatic experience you have. So there is certainly an increasing trend of online victimization. We call it as technology facilitated sexual violence, which is the increasing trend across the globe, not just in India or Indonesia, across the globe, because we have become so much reliant on technology. Days cannot pass without being using our mobile phones or without hooking onto our laptops. So such is the state that we are in, and naturally the kind of crime that the more the time we spend somewhere, the more the crime can also happen in that space, right? If I go to office every day, there is a possibility that something will happen to me in the office. So if I'm spending more time in my virtual space, there is a possibility that something is going to happen to me in the virtual space. Wherever I am, I'm available most of the time. That is where the victimization is also going to happen. So naturally, the virtual space will become the space for committing crimes. And very soon, these ratios will shift very quickly. And the government of India is in the process of bringing in data protection bill. Data Protection Act will soon become a reality in the country. And there would be extra layers of cyberspace protection which could be guaranteed. And cyber cells have increased, number of cyber police stations are increased in the country to keep up to this soon going to be highly demanding attention. So number of cyber cells, cyber police stations, cyber experts have increased. There are so many colleges and universities which are offering now courses in cyber security, cyber criminology, cyber victimology, right? Online fraud. There's so many things which are specifically catering to cyberspace. So we certainly have so much to learn and do things quickly. What is important is to fasten our response mechanisms, because we do not have a lot of time to think and plan and devise mechanisms. The threat is already in the vicinity. The threat is already close by, right? So we'll have to be quicker in our actions to be able to match up and minimize the quantity of victimization.
Okay, doctor. Again, still we have two participants. Such a very big enthusiasm of the participant. We can see we have warm regards from Dr. Gautam Kumar from Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. Very engaging talk. Best regards. Okay, thank you, Dr. Gautam. Okay, for the next question, I'll give to Linger. Please, Miss Linger, to open your camera, introduce yourself, and then convey your question.
Yes, thank you, Miss Nadia. Good morning, everyone. Introducing myself, my name is Linggar Wijutami. I am from Faculty of Law, PGRI Semarang University. This question for both of speakers. Do you agree that early marriage will be an excellent issue for protect women from sexual offense? Thank you.
Okay, such a very nice question for both of speakers, right? Do you agree that early marriage is an excellent solution for this upcoming issue? Thank you. Please, Dr. Ben first or Miss Marcelina?
Anything is fine now. Miss Marcelina, would you like to answer this first?
Okay, Miss Marcelina, want to answer first?
Okay, thank you for question from Ms. Slinger. The solution about the solution to protect women and children from violence are the regulation in every to improve protect from the government to protecting and handling every violence from the victims of children and women, and then to empowerment the regulation, especially in every place, and the role everyone to protect how to optimize to protect women and children in this and sorry in every place, so we can to minimize amount of women and children victim in Indonesia. Maybe can be answer to complete from Mr. Dr. Banu.
Yeah, thank you, Marcelina, and thank you for that interesting question. See, I do not have a very direct or a specific answer to your question. So let me put my ideas like this. Okay, you said, can child marriage be a solution, and can that be offered? For me, child marriage in itself in entirety is a problem. So I do not think we can solve violence against the women and children problem with another problem. So this is where I come from. So child marriage, I see it as a problem. So I don't think we can handle a magnitude of problem like violence against children with a solution as a child marriage, because for me, I see child marriage in itself as a problem. So I cannot offer a solution, a problem as a solution to another problem. That is where I begin my conversation with. Another thing, when you look at violence against children, sexual abusers, child abusers, most of it happen not outside of home. If you look at the statistics, most of these child sexual offenses are committed within the home setting. The perpetrators are largely the family members, the neighbors, the relatives. These are known people. These are people who are known to the child. So I do not think how marrying a girl at a very early age can ensure protection of the child. Okay, because most of the perpetrators comes from the family or the neighbors or the relatives. So, so that is another logic that I want to provide. Why marrying a girl at an younger age could not guarantee protection to the child. Okay, it could be the husband who can be very, very abusive. both emotionally and physically. It could be a father-in-law, or a brother-in-law. There could be all scenarios which are possible when you're talking about child abuse, especially a child sexual abuse. So that probably I know I'm fully aware of societies where child marriages is normal. Okay, and maybe there could be less number of crimes in that society, but I do not want to correlate child marriage to less number of crimes, because I don't think that is how it works, or that is how could be a solution for other countries. So we cannot have this as a prescription, or as universal prescription for all countries to adapt this kind of strategy, because it will not work. Maybe in certain communities and certain countries, it may be working, but still I do not see a direct correlation with child marriage and child protection. For me, both are problems. So child marriage in itself is a problem for me too.
Okay, it's a different problem, actually. Okay, for the last question, it will be Miss Mila. Time is yours.
Thank you for this time, Mr. Nakia. Introduce myself. My name is Mila. My question is: we know that law has been completed for India and also for Indonesia, but sexual offense still happen. Actually, for the solution, what do we have to stop actually? And my second question, especially for Miss Marcelina, what we can do if there is sexual offense in campus, and are there special regulation about that? Thank you.
Okay, we will go for the first question first from we talk about law regulation, but law regulation has been complete, right? But the sexual offense still happens. So what we will do actually? What we have to stop? Please, Dr. Banu.
Sorry, Dr. Adi, I couldn't hear your question. There was resound.
Oh, because there is a
your
double.
Voice was,
Yeah.
it was echoing.
Okay, I will first the question to Dr. Banu. Later we will talk. We talk about law regulation, but we know that law regulation has been complete, but the sexual offense still happen. So actually, what we can stop to prevent if the law regulation has been complete but cannot tackle the sexual offense?
Yeah. So laws are only halfway solutions. Okay, and lawmaking is the easiest thing to do. To bring out a new law, making it to an enactment, is a very easier and direct way of handling any kind of problem. The problem comes with the implementation of the law. Making laws are not difficult. You and I can sit together and say that this is the law which is suitable for all the citizens of this country. But the challenge will come when you have to implement this law. And most of the laws that I discussed have challenges in terms of its implementation. So one way of strengthening these laws is to also ensure that you also look at the implementation part and then go to the ground reality in terms of what are the challenges in terms of implementing this kind of law. For example, a POCSO, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, POCSO Act, when you're looking at it, there are several challenges on the ground level. In the reality, there are several challenges. So now for you to strengthen this law, it's important to understand what are the challenges of its implementation. Can we do something in terms of making it easier and smoother for its implementation? That's one way where we have to look at. And two, there has to be a community response, a community engagement to social problems is the ideal solution. When you and I are not aware, are not educated enough, or not informed enough in terms of what this problem is, or how do I bring some kind of remedial measures to this problem, if I don't know, if I'm not educated, if I'm not aware, if I'm not motivated to do something about it, right? Victimization is not going to stop. Crimes are not going to stop. There will be crimes, there will be victimizations across the globe. In your country, in my country, there's going to be crime. But what is also equally important is what do we do after some crime happened to a victim? How are we supporting this victim? How do we talk to them? How do we make sure that this victim is supported? Does this victim need some help in terms of going to the police station and making a complaint? Does this victim know what the laws are, what her rights are as a victim? Does she know enough information to handle the situation for herself? Does she have enough resources to handle the situation for herself? These are some of the questions that we'll have to ask as responsible social individuals and then do in our ways possible to assist these victims. So that is why towards the end of my presentation, I said that the biggest job of the criminal justice system is not to punish the offenders. Punishing offenders is not the end goal. What is more important is to ensure that victims are treated properly. Victims' rights have been preserved. Victim support has been guaranteed. Right? The way we treat our victims will determine the strong criminal justice system, not the stronger punishments. So it's important, one, to strengthen the laws in terms of the challenges in implementation, and two, to community as a response mechanism, not individual, community as a response mechanism. Thank you for the question.
Okay, such a very nice answer. Well, the second question to Ms. Marcelina, how the role of the campus to tackle sexual offenses in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Miss Nadia. And I would like to answer from question from Miss Mila. If a campus happens sexual harassment and or violence, we can report to task force of protect and handling sexual violence. UPRIS also has task force and rectors regulation to protect and handling sexual violence or sexual harassment. And UPRIS as also has standard operational procedure to handling victim of sexual harassment or sexual violence. And we can also collaborate between all of society in campus as like lecturer, students, and all society and in campus, especially in UPRIS. Okay, that's all. Thank you, Miss Nadia.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Marcelina. So, we will end the question and answer. And the next session, we have a photo session for the committee, please. And all for the audiences, please open your camera. We will have a photo session. Open your camera. Okay, I will count 1, 2, 3. Again, for the next slide, I will count 1, 2, 3. Nice. Enough? Miss Natasha, enough?
I think enough.
Okay, nice. So I will read the conclusion for this very fruitful discussion about sexual offenses perspective from Indonesia and India. That we still have a big effort towards protection of women and children against sexual offenses. The government aims to curb arbitrariness towards women and children and eliminate disparities, and the necessary steps have been prompted toward achieving the same. Moreover, the need of hour is to instill the significance of awareness in people so that it helps them growing up as an individual. The is to have a sound implementation mechanism to curb the problems, and that is possible only when the people are willing to bring about a change in that regard. The modus operandi of dealing with such matters must get updated periodically to assess the current demands. Hence, working on the problem positively shall give a healthy outcome. So, I'm Nadia Latifah as the moderator on behalf of the committee. I'd like to say thank you so much for the invited speaker today, Dr. Banu Prakashnuna from RV University, India, as well as Mrs. Marcelina Hardianti from Law Faculty, University of PGRI Semarang, for your time, your dedication, and insight for us. And we hope our collaboration with UGRIS and RV University, India do not stop with this event, but this event being a bridge to open a fruitful collaboration for the next future or the next agenda. And again, hats off to all the committee for International Office Universitas PGRI Semarang that hosted this agenda. Thank you for all the audiences. See you for the next event. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi